Daniel Miller's perfect family image shattered the night he was murdered. But it was Claire Miller's hidden affair and Emily Miller's terrifying escape that exposed a truth darker than anyone imagined, leaving Detective Laura Hayes racing against time to untangle a chilling conspiracy where love, betrayal, and murder collided in ways no one saw coming. On the evening of October 12th, the town of Cedarwood was wrapped in silence, its narrow streets lit only by dim street lamps, and the golden glow of autumn leaves fluttering in the cool air. For most residents, it was a night like any other, one spent inside with warm dinners and quiet family conversations. At the Miller residence on Maple Avenue, however, the atmosphere was far from ordinary. Behind the pristine white fence and carefully trimmed hedges, a storm of tension was brewing that no neighbor could have guessed. Daniel Miller had always been admired in the community. As a contractor, he had built homes for half the families in Cedarwood, his reputation anchored in trust and reliability. To the outside world, he was the picture of stability, a family man who worked hard and loved his wife and daughter. Claire Miller, elegant and soft-spoken, was equally admired. She volunteered at the local library, helped organize church events, and smiled warmly at anyone who crossed her path. Their daughter Emily, a bright 16-year-old with dreams of becoming a writer, completed the portrait of a family that many others envied. But behind closed doors, the perfect image was beginning to crumble. Neighbors would later recall strange moments in the weeks leading up to that night. Raised voices muffled behind closed windows, hurried exits from the driveway, and Emily walking home from school alone with her head down. No one thought much of it at the time. Every family had its struggles, after all. Yet those small observations would gain haunting significance after the events that unfolded inside the Miller home that night. The quiet was shattered by a violent struggle. A heated argument escalated into chaos, the sounds of crashing furniture echoing through the walls. The commotion caught the attention of several neighbors who hesitated at their windows, unsure whether to call for help. When piercing screams ripped through the silence, hesitation turned to fear, and frantic calls were made to the police. By the time officers arrived, the scene inside was devastating. The front door was unlocked, and the living room looked as though a storm had ripped through it. A lamp lay shattered on the floor. Cushions were scattered, and streaks of blood painted the hardwood. In the middle of the room lay Daniel Miller, his body motionless, multiple stab wounds across his chest. Just feet away, Claire was found collapsed, her face battered, and her clothing torn. The knife that ended Daniel's life, still smeared with blood, was left on the carpet. What unsettled police most was the absence of Emily. Her room upstairs was empty, her phone left behind on the desk. It was as though she had vanished in the middle of the night, leaving behind only a trail of questions. Officers immediately began canvassing the area, questioning neighbors, and searching the surrounding streets. For the community of Cedarwood, the perfect family had been shattered in the most brutal way imaginable. The nightmare had only just begun, and the truth would prove far darker than anyone dared to imagine. Detective Laura Hayes was called to the Miller residence just after midnight, her headlights cutting through the flashing red and blue of patrol cars already crowding Maple Avenue. She had seen her share of crime scenes over the years, but nothing prepared her for the uneasy quiet that lingered outside the pristine house. Officers moved with urgency, their radios crackling, while curious neighbors clustered on their porches, whispering among themselves about the family they thought they knew so well. Inside, the sight was even more unsettling. Daniel Miller's body had been covered with a white sheet, but the dark stains bleeding through left no doubt about the brutality of the attack. Claire sat in the kitchen, wrapped in a blanket, her face bruised, her eyes swollen from crying. Officer Ryan Cooper had been the first to respond, and he explained that Claire had told them an intruder had broken into the house, attacking her husband and fleeing before police arrived. It was a story that might have seemed plausible at first glance, but to Laura, something felt off almost immediately. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no jimmied locks. Everything about the house suggested the killer had simply walked right in. The absence of Emily quickly became the focus. At just 16, her sudden disappearance was alarming. Officers searched her bedroom, finding her school bag and clothes undisturbed, her phone abandoned on her desk with the charger still plugged in. There were no messages, no recent calls, and no signs of a planned runaway. For a girl known to her teachers and friends as responsible and close to her father, her vanishing raised even more questions. Detectives began to wonder. Had Emily been taken by the intruder? Or did she play a part in the night's events? Laura ordered a thorough sweep of the property. In the backyard, officers found a set of footprints in the damp grass, leading from the back porch toward the wooded area that bordered the neighborhood. The prints were smaller than expected, possibly belonging to a teenager or a woman. That detail complicated the theory of a masked intruder. Evidence bags filled quickly with torn fabric, blood samples, and the kitchen knife recovered near Daniel's body. The crime scene technicians worked silently, aware that every detail could unlock the truth. Meanwhile, Claire's version of events began to unravel under questioning. She claimed the attacker wore a mask, that he came through the back door and surprised him. Yet, when pressed, she faltered on key details: what the intruder looked like, what he said, even the sequence of the attack. Laura noted her hesitation, her tendency to glance away when asked about her husband's final moments. It wasn't enough to accuse her, but it was enough to plant suspicion. As dawn approached, the Miller home was sealed off with crime scene tape, a once happy household now marked as a site of horror. Emily's missing status was broadcast across the county, her face on every patrol car's dashboard. The town of Cedarwood awoke to the shocking news. Daniel Miller was dead. His daughter had vanished, and the story behind it all was far from simple. For Detective Hayes, it was the beginning of a case that would test every instinct she had, because the truth hiding beneath the surface was more sinister than anyone could imagine. The search for Emily Miller consumed the entire town by the second day after the murder. Flyers with her school portrait were posted in shop windows, on telephone poles, and at every gas station in Cedarwood. Police officers combed through wooded trails and drainage ditches, calling her name into the heavy silence. Volunteers formed search parties, convinced the teenager was lost or injured somewhere nearby. The entire community wanted to believe Emily was an innocent victim, but whispers of doubt began to spread as detectives uncovered troubling details about her family life. Detective Laura Hayes worked tirelessly from the incident room set up in the local precinct. Phone records, financial statements, and testimonies piled up quickly, painting a picture of a family that was far less perfect than they had appeared. Daniel Miller's business had recently hit financial trouble, leaving unpaid debts and angry clients. More alarming, Claire Miller's phone revealed a series of secret messages exchanged with a man named Mark Reynolds, a contractor from a neighboring town known for his shady dealings and a criminal record that included fraud and assault. The messages were intimate, even romantic, suggesting a relationship that stretched back months. The discovery shifted suspicion sharply toward Claire, raising the possibility that Daniel's murder was not random at all, but carefully planned. Still, Emily's role remained uncertain. Friends at school described her as quiet but thoughtful, deeply devoted to her father, and often frustrated by her mother's distant behavior. Teachers recalled her staying after class to write in her journal, sometimes confiding about the stress at home. Yet one of her closest friends revealed something shocking. Emily had once said she wished she could escape everything and start over somewhere, far away. At the time, it seemed like a harmless expression of teenage frustration, but now it felt disturbingly relevant. Late in the evening, a breakthrough came when officers expanded the search radius beyond the immediate neighborhood. About 5 miles from the Miller home, in an abandoned shed near the railroad tracks, they found evidence Emily had been there. A blanket, a water bottle, and a notebook bearing her handwriting were recovered. The entries in the notebook were disturbing. Pages described her confusion, fear, and anger over her parents' constant fighting. One passage hinted at her knowledge of Claire's relationship with Mark Reynolds, suggesting she had seen them together in secret. The words blurred between sadness and rage, leaving investigators uncertain whether she had run away to escape danger or was hiding because she had played a part in the violent crime. The discovery intensified the case. Media outlets seized on the story, portraying Emily as either a terrified missing girl or a possible teenage killer on the run. Reporters swarmed Cedarwood, hungry for every update. Laura Hayes felt the pressure mounting, but her instincts told her the truth was more complicated than the headlines suggested. Emily's absence was deliberate. That much was clear, and whatever she had witnessed that night could unravel the entire case. The challenge was finding her before it was too late, before whoever had killed Daniel silenced her as well. Detective Laura Hayes had little time to waste as new evidence began to point in directions she had not anticipated. The name Mark Reynolds appeared repeatedly in phone logs and financial transactions connected to Claire Miller. And the more she learned about him, the more unsettling the picture became. He was not just a former contractor, but a man with a history of manipulation, using charm to hide his violent temper. Several old police reports described disputes that had turned physical, though none had ever led to a serious conviction. To Laura, he seemed like the missing piece of a puzzle that had been hiding in plain sight. Tracking Mark was not easy. His address listed in official records was abandoned, and neighbors claimed he had not been seen for weeks. But his vehicle, a dark pickup truck, was spotted by highway patrol near Cedarwood just days before Daniel's murder. This suggested he was closer than expected. When investigators dug deeper, they discovered surveillance footage from a gas station that showed Mark and Claire together late at night, only days before Daniel's death. They were seated in his truck, speaking in hushed tones, their faces tense. The footage was grainy, but the body language revealed far more than words ever could. The discovery intensified suspicions that Daniel's murder had been orchestrated. But the question remained. What about Emily? Had she discovered her mother's affair and confronted her? Had she seen or heard something that night that forced her to run? The answers seemed buried within the few belongings she left behind. In her recovered notebook, one line stood out above the rest. If he finds out, none of us will be safe. Investigators debated whether he referred to Daniel or Mark, but Laura suspected the latter. The case took a darker turn when a local farmer reported seeing a girl matching Emily's description walking along a deserted road at dawn the morning after the murder. She appeared exhausted, carrying a small backpack, and when he slowed his truck to offer help, she fled into the trees. Search teams were redirected to the area, but by the time officers combed through the forest, Emily had vanished again. Every lead seemed to place her one step ahead, as though she was intentionally avoiding both her family and the police. Meanwhile, Claire Miller's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She shifted between grief-stricken widow and defensive suspect, denying the affair even when confronted with evidence. When Laura pressed her about Mark's sick, Claire admitted only that they knew each other but insisted he had nothing to do with her husband's death. Yet her calm exterior cracked when asked about Emily, her eyes darting nervously, her hands trembling. It was as if she feared what her daughter might reveal if found alive. As the investigation entered its fourth day, Laura received a chilling tip. Mark Reynolds' truck had been abandoned near the outskirts of town, close to an old warehouse district. Inside the vehicle were fast food wrappers, a discarded phone, and strands of hair that forensic tests would later confirm belonged to Emily. This discovery shattered the runaway theory. Emily hadn't simply disappeared, she had been with Mark. The realization sent waves of fear through the investigative team. If Mark had her, she was in grave danger. And if Claire had helped orchestrate this, then the betrayal went deeper than anyone imagined. The warehouse on the outskirts of town became the focus of a massive police operation. Detective Laura Hayes coordinated the team carefully, knowing that Emily's life could depend on every decision made. The building had long been abandoned, its windows boarded and its walls covered in graffiti. But signs of recent activity suggested it had been used as a hideout. When officers surrounded the structure in the early hours of dawn, silence swayed heavy in the air. A battering ram was used to force open the rusted door, and the team moved in with weapons drawn. Inside, the smell of dust and oil hung thick. Old machinery sat in the corners. But what caught everyone's attention was a small makeshift camp near the center of the warehouse. A blanket, half-eaten food, and a collection of water bottles revealed that someone had been living there. And then, huddled in the shadows, was Emily. She was pale, trembling, and visibly terrified. She raised her hands in surrender as the officers rushed to secure the area. Relief washed over the team when they realized she was alive, but her condition told them she had endured days of fear and uncertainty. Emily was taken to safety, and once she had calmed enough to speak, her words shattered any remaining illusions about what had happened. She explained that on the night of the murder, she had heard her parents fighting more violently than ever before. When she went downstairs, she saw Mark Reynolds in the house, standing with her mother. Daniel had discovered the affair, and an argument exploded into chaos. Emmeline described Mark grabbing her father, a struggle breaking out, and then the sudden violence that ended Daniel's life. Her mother had stood by, pleading with Mark, but doing nothing to stop him. Frozen with shock, Emily had fled before anyone could notice her. Mark had found her later, near the edge of town. He convinced her to come with him, claiming he only wanted to protect her from the aftermath. But once Emily realized his true intentions, she understood she was being kept not for her safety, but because she was a witness who could destroy him. Her notebook, which investigators had already found, was her desperate attempt to record the truth in case she never escaped. Armed with Emily's testimony, police launched a full-scale manhunt for Mark Reynolds. For nearly a week, he evaded capture, moving between towns and relying on contacts to hide him, but his past eventually caught up with him. A routine traffic stop in a neighboring county revealed his identity, and after a tense standoff, he was arrested. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Forensic traces at the Miller home, eyewitness testimony from Emily, and the incriminating messages exchanged with Claire. Claire Miller's downfall followed swiftly. Faced with the evidence, she was forced to admit her role in the conspiracy, while she claimed she never intended for Daniel to die. Her relationship with Mark and her silence during the attack implicated her fully. Prosecutors charged her with conspiracy to commit murder, while Mark faced charges of murder, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. In the end, justice was served, but the Miller family was left in ruins. Emily, once a quiet teenager navigating ordinary struggles, had been thrust into a nightmare of betrayal and violence. Her testimony not only brought her father's killer to justice, but also exposed the devastating truth about her mother. For the town of Cedarwood, the case would linger as one of the darkest chapters in its history. A reminder that sometimes the most chilling stories are not born from fiction, but from the secrets families keep hidden until it is too late.